Mike. Thanks everyone for staying on and listening to some things that you might find interesting and informative about our certification process, the ERO certification process, and some of the things that we RF do to make that a smooth process for entities. Just as far as the agenda goes, we are going to talk briefly about what governs the certification process and the different types of certification activities. We'll look at some triggers for certification reviews. We'll look at the high-level process, and we'll also look at some templates throughout the process to show you some things you can expect to see. A typical process timeline diagram that I hope would help you out. And I'll briefly mention some things about the FERC Order 881. And then we'll just have some resources, slides, and questions, and then Slido throughout, mixed throughout. So I think next is a Slido question. Am I correct?
Yep, I got it, Sam. I'm starting it now. So the question you'll see in the WebEx screen is, the question is, what entity registrations must be certified, and select all that apply. It says TOP, BA, PC, RC. Okay, and we're getting the results in, and so most of you selected TOP, BA, and RC, which those are the three correct ones.
All right, good. Most of you are pretty familiar, so that's a good thing. So certifications in general, why are we doing those? So for all registered functions are important, so don't get me wrong, but ERO determined many years ago, especially when we started mandatory standards, that all TOPs, BAs, and RCs needed to be certified just because of the crucial nature of those functions. And what I mean by that is, operating the transmission system, balancing critical load, making sure there's reliability on the system itself. All those things involve human interaction and human tasks to do. So it's really important to ensure that that the registered functions can meet those crucial actions and are capable of continuing to do that. And I'll go through some of the different types of activities and things like that. So next slide, we talk about what governs certifications, and many of you already know this. Section 500, Appendix 5A is the specific location, and it's specifically sections 4 and 5 of that Appendix 5A. Section 4 is for brand new TOPs, BAs, and RCs. When you first become a TOP, BA, or RC, we'll be looking at every single requirement for that function and go through it and ensure that you can meet those once you go live with being a new TOP and are registered through our registration group. RF personally hasn't seen, in my 8 years here, I've seen one of those. It was a very minor one, but from what I've seen, me talking, I don't see those as being very common at all. So throughout this presentation, I'm really going to talk about, when I mention certification activities, it's really reviews of changes to already registered and certified entities. One thing I wanted to also note on that previous slide, Michelle, is that transmission owners, of course, don't have to be certified. However, transmission owners in the PJM footprint, they take on tasks, transmission operator tasks, per the agreement they have for the TOP matrix. So even though they don't have to be certified, when they make certain operational changes that I'll describe later, they do need to go through some type of review potentially. And we call those readiness evaluations. And that's the language from the ROP that you see down below. And that's also laid out in Section 5, Appendix 5A as well. So just a particular note there. And most of you, I think most of the TOs and PJM are aware of that. As far as certification types, 4 main types. So I already mentioned full certification when you want to register as a brand new TOP, BA, and or RC. And like I mentioned, those go through every requirement, and then you get registered once your certification is accepted. Full certification reviews are the most common in our footprint, like I mentioned. Those are a review of certain operational changes that a TO, BA, and or RC makes. And we don't look at every single requirement, obviously. Depending on the change, we reduce the amount of requirements specific to that change. So you'll see a subset of all the requirements. Readiness evaluations, I mentioned that previously. Those are truncated even more when scoped, because there's only certain, for the TO-TOP matrix, there's only certain requirements that PJM has assigned or shared with PJM. And we look at those and scope the engagement just like you would a certification review, but starting with that PJM TOP matrix. Those readiness evaluations are similar. We do them just like the certification review process. So we treat it just like the certification reviews as well, but with probably a little less requirements. Then there's one thing that was added to the rules of procedure a few years back, and that's called a lesser activity. This was put in there, thankfully, not only for our sake, but especially for your sake, that to provide less work for you. Because before, things like, going from an EMS version 1.1 to a 1.2, something minor like that, a lot of times had to go through the whole certification process. Well, it was realized that why do that? I mean, it's very low risk. At the most, those kind of things should be a lesser activity, meaning we don't have to follow every ROP step. It's optional if we want to follow some of it. But basically, what we do at RF is we have touch point meetings just to see how things are going. How can we help you with any questions that you have? We may ask you some questions through RFIs, informal Word documents, not a complete matrix of requirements. And at the end, we may give you some kind of summary report. So it's not defined that we have to follow every step, and we try to make it as easy as possible, especially considering the fact that it's a very minor, low risk type of change. And then there's also the option of no certification activity as well when we get your application, which I'll discuss soon. I think we have a Slido coming up on certification review.
Yep, I'm gonna start the next Slido here, Sam. The question is, what are the 3 triggers of a possible certification review activity, and select all that applies? So we have EMS upgrade, footprint change, new registration as a GOP, and control center relocation. And give me a second. Oops. Showing the results, it looks like most of you got that correct. The correct answers were EMS upgrades, footprint change, and control center relocation.
Okay. So those are the triggers for possible certification activity. I'll start off with the first one, footprint change. We do see these, not as often as some of the other triggers, but we do see these. And this is an important thing to review. Things like adding assets to your footprint, even changing, for example, your transmission line voltages from a non-BES to BES. That can constitute some type of activity, because now you're taking on new responsibilities, and then now you're in the realm of NERC compliance. We also, if there's expanded boundaries, meter boundaries, and so we And there's also some things like, maybe there's decertification of changes when there's JRO and CFR assignments that you no longer have to comply with. But there's also, if there's a gaining entity, which means if there's an entity in this process that is gaining responsibilities, that's a footprint change. Another example, if there's a new transmission owner in the PJM footprint, since PJM is your TOP, that would constitute a footprint change as well. Next slide. All right, now some of the even more common ones that I've seen, control center relocation. That is happening quite a bit over the past few years. Old buildings, old infrastructure, going to better locations, better areas of the footprint. And those have happened quite a bit. We've seen a lot of them this year. We've seen a lot of them over the years. Things to look at, and it says right there, it lays it out pretty well in the rules of procedure. This is just a copy and paste from the rules of procedure, but I mean, we're looking at a lot of different things when it comes to a relocation. And when I say relocation, I don't mean just you're relocating to a new another building, but also completely constructing a whole new control center and maybe making even changes to a control center that are significant. But primarily, things we want to look at, and it's laid down there, it's laid out there, is on a SIP standpoint. There's a lot of things when the control center is relocated. You want to make sure that ESPs and PSPs are properly in place per SIP 5. SIP 9 will be in scopes, looking at maybe any updated recovery plans. From an ops standpoint, you may look at TOP1 with data exchange capabilities, ensuring that there's redundant and diversely routed exchange infrastructure. EOP8 might be in scope, making sure that this new location of this new control center has coordinated backup functionality with existing backup control center. And also communication between, now that you have a new building, a new control center, ensuring that there's good communication capabilities with your RTOs, neighboring entities, and whoever else. And those are the COM standards as well. So some standards to expect and some questions to expect as we go through the process. And last but not least, for triggers of certification reviews, is the EMS modification. I've seen these a lot lately as well. Entities going from one vendor to a new vendor just for different reasons. Old EMS functionality that going to a new EMS might help with different things like situational awareness and just enhanced functionalities. So there could be different types. I mean, there's an EMS upgrade for the current EMS that you have. Go to a significantly higher upgrade. It may not be however, as cumbersome as a whole new EMS replacement. So those upgrades may even fall into lesser activities as well. When you have a complete overhaul of an EMS, that most likely will result in some type of review above a lesser activity. Things to look at especially is PER5 training. I mean, the operator, it's so important for him or her to understand the process, understand the EMS that they're looking at, the brand new EMS, and be able to demonstrate that to us when we do an on-site visit as well. We want to make sure that any procedures referencing the old legacy EMS are updated. And then again, when we go on site, we might look at things like, can the operator effectively calculate facility ratings for FAC8 with their new EMS? Can they effectively navigate to look at the quality of data per TOP10 along with alarm process monitors and things like that? Also, total overhauls of EMSs a lot of times involve new hardware. That's where SIP kind of gets involved too. So there may be a lot of SIP requirements involved there too. So there's some things you can expect when we go through a process. This slide is basically a summary of what kind of the things I already went through about the triggers of a certification review. And in big bold, the whole overall concept is operator ability to monitor, assess, and control the grid. That's the overarching thing we're doing here with certification, and ensuring that that's being done. And this is just a list, a summary list of things that I've already discussed on one slide. It may be something good to just have on your desk sometimes to just look at and see, okay, this is something I should expect to do. It's not a completely inclusive list necessarily, but these are the main high level things, important things. So it's a good slide to maybe reference every once in a while. So the certification process. I'm going to go through this a little quickly. I got 20 minutes left, I think. So initiating the process. It starts with the application/questionnaire. That is found on the ReliabilityFirst.org website. If you go to tools, you'll see registration and certification, and you'll see a section that says more on certifications. And then you'll see the page that has a description of what a certification is, where you can submit the application questionnaire. The application questionnaire means you're applying, this is who I am, this is the functions I represent, these are the changes we're going to make. And then the questionnaire, as part of that application, gives us initial information so that we don't have to have 15 meetings to decide, what are all these different things that you're changing. So on that same page, under documents section, you'll see the notification and preliminary questionnaire, and you can submit that directly to the entity engagement at rfirst.org email address. And ensure that you do not include any sensitive information when you do that. Any sensitive information and any things we do through the process of exchanging documentation will all be through a secure site that only the entity and the certification team will see. So we'll set you up with that once we start the process. There's different, and as the process initiation continues, like I said, we get the application. One thing I highlighted there was we like to have enough time to do this. So at least a year in advance, and you probably should know a year in advance that you're making a change. Let us know. Give us notification, an application, at least a year. What that does is give us an overview of all the changes, but also going through the overview of changes, we're going to have a touch point with you as an entity, go through the application and see if make sure that we understand what you're doing and ask clarifying questions. This then helps us determine, well, what should we do? Should we do a certification review? Should we do a readiness evaluation, a lesser activity, or no activity at all? We determine that internally. Then we have to get approval from NERC. We write them a letter, explain to them all the different things, and explain to them why we want to do this approach. Once it's confirmed with NERC, then we'll start getting into the meat of the process. So some high-level steps. Once we get the go-ahead on an approach, we assemble the review team. The review team is a subject matter experts on the ops and SIP side. You'll usually see 2 of each. If there's an MRE type of review that crosses regions, you'll see representatives from some of those regions as well on the team. The subject matter experts on the certification team are required to go through training. There's training documentation, so we attest to that before we start a process. We determine scope. Okay, we put together an initial scope. of all the different standards that may be impacted by this change that you're making. One thing to note that I should have mentioned earlier, and just so your understanding is, with these matrices and with this process, it's forward-looking. Once you go live, we're trying to make sure that you are capable and have done all the training and process documentation to be ready to go live with a change. So it's forward-looking versus an audit, which is more backward-looking. And then during this whole process internally, we'll also be looking at creating RFIs, which we put in the matrix. And then the review team reviews those responses once the entity gets back with us. And I'll show you a typical timeline of when some of these things happen. Then if it's a certification review or readiness evaluation, and maybe sometimes a lesser activity, there's going to be some kind of on-site, in person, many times, but sometimes virtual as well. We've learned from the pandemic in 2020 that, we started doing virtuals for the first time, and they worked really well. But sometimes it's critical enough that you should be on site to walk around a brand new control center, to be there, sit next to an operator and talk. You really can't emulate that type of thing when you're just virtual. So, but again, we do some virtual, and what you expect the on-site is a control room tour at least. SME interviews per some of the RFI and matrices questions, and then demonstrations from the operator if there's like an EMS change. What you come out of that is addressing open items, and a lot of times open items are things like, okay, you haven't completed all your training yet. You're like 70% there. That's okay. That happens a lot. It's just as long as you have that by the time you go live.
Hey, Sam, 1 second. We lost your audio there.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, we got you now. Okay.
Okay.
Last we heard was, you may not be 100% of the way there, and that's okay. So maybe pick up from there.
Yeah. So addressing open items such as, maybe training is not complete, maybe process documents are not complete. If there's things that are open that are not critical, you can still go live, but provide a schedule of when you're going to complete those things. Now, I can't tell you exactly. There's certain things maybe that just you're completely missed. Well, you can't go live until you go and then close those items, those high-risk items. Now, a big thing also that I like and kind of leads to, kind of fits into our outreach group, entity engagement, is recording positive observations and recommendations. Positive observation shows us, and then we communicate that internally, that this entity is doing great in this area and far exceeding some things, and they have some innovative things that they're doing. That could be even shared throughout the ERO, and maybe shared anonymously with other entities as well. Recommendations is a big one also. Here are some things you can do better. You can add more process steps here. You can have a RACI chart that shows specifically, who's responsible for what. These recommendations, not only we want, hopefully you can follow through on recommendations, not only for liability, but in the back of our head, we're thinking we want you to be able to be successful in future audits. Some of these things that we recommend will help you with your future audits. So a lot of good things come out of these as far as improving reliability and your success in the compliance program. And then finally, we issue some type of final report and letter depending on the activity. The letter is signed by our CEO. On certifications, you also see a letter by NERC. Readiness evaluations not necessarily need a letter from NERC. I wanted to give you a look at the certification templates. So I want to go in a little more detail so that you know what kind of documents to expect when we go through a process. As far as the NERC certification templates go, they're on the NERC website, public information. Under organization certification, there's a link there in the slide that you may access later. But when you go to the NERC website, you go under compliance. On the left-hand side, you'll see organization certification. And there it just shows you what are all the different documents that we use during the certification review. There could be some things are, well, the first one, there's some things that we use internally ourselves and that we share with you and use during the process. For example, the first one is a checklist. That keeps us grounded as far as making sure that we're following every step of the ROP as an ERO, and making sure everything is done and do our due diligence. You'll see training records. All of us have to go through training like I discussed before. Some of these things you won't see at all. However, there's things in what I call the certification package that include like the composition approval of the team, sort of like you do in audits. There may be questionnaires, but a lot of times those questionnaires are only for brand new TOPs, BAs, and RCs. These, what it's specifically called pre-certification questionnaires. You're already certified. If you're not already certified anything, there's no reason to fill these out. And then you'll see an example of a certification master matrix template. You'll see an example certification schedule, a sample on-site agenda, an opening and closing presentation. What can you expect from those? So these templates really give you some good idea of what we're going to go through through a certification process. So wanted to make you aware of that. It'd be great to review these just to get an idea if you haven't been through one before or haven't been through one in a while. It'll give you an idea of what to expect. On the next few slides, I just wanted to show you some examples. When you see a certification matrix, this is what it looks like. It's a very small snapshot. I'm not expecting you to read everything that's in there. This one's an ops matrix for an EMS, just some standards that may be involved, like I described before. It has the standard, the requirement, the text of the requirement, and then we start creating these columns. Is it in scope? Should it be in scope? Yes or no? We filter that by the yeses. Then we have a column for initial RFI that we want to ask. There's a column there for also to give an entity a sneak peek. You know, this is just a question, or this is something we just want to demonstrate on site, or this is an RFI and something we want to demonstrate on site. That's just our initial kind of take at it. As we go through the process, we may say, well, we needed more than just an RFI. We need to see something on site. Columns in orange are the things that we expect you to fill out. Those are answers to our initial RFI. Maybe when we said it should be in scope, your answer is no, there's no impact, and here's why. And we can close those out. The biggest thing and one of the big things in the certification process is we want to close out as many items as we can before we come on site. Because when we come on site, we want it to be efficient. We want to just talk. We want to get some information on some things, maybe some clarifications. And we don't want to make it a week-long engagement either. And every engagement that I've been on has been either 1 to 2 days between that time frame. So it's not a huge lift when it comes to on-site. The next slide just shows you an example of an ops matrix for a readiness evaluation. It'll look like the TOP matrix for the first few columns. It'll show the assigned and shared tasks and what the entity needs to do. And then the rest looks like just any other matrix as well. This is for a snapshot of some requirements for a control center. Then there's also a SIP matrix. Now, SIP doesn't care if you're a TO and PGM or if you're a registered TOP, BARC. all requirements are in play, but of course they're whittled down to what changes you are making. This is an example, a very small snapshot of a control center review for SIP. So hopefully all those documents give you a good overview of some things to expect, some documents to show, some templates. And I also encourage you very much to look at and read and understand section 4 and 5 of the Rules of Procedure, Appendix 5A. So next, I want to talk about the certification activity timeline. This is a graphic I put together that hopefully gives you a good idea of what things to and when to expect certain things. We went through pretty much all of these things, but it starts with a year. Like I said before, at least a year ahead of time, let us know. Some of the things that you'll see on the slide, you'll see the word go live or pre-onsite. So keep that in mind as well. The initiation, talked about that, approximately 1 year before you go live with the change. Then, like I said before, and all those blue dots, that's collaboration, constant collaboration throughout the process with with you guys, the entity, with the review team, with NERC, combination of all of those. But between initiation and approval from NERC, as I mentioned before, we got the scope, clarifying questions, things like that. That's the initial thoughts of scope. But then after that, after we get approval from NERC, really the meat of the process starts. Approval from NERC, ideally 9 months before you go live with the change. Then, as we meet internally, we talk about, well, what should the scope be? What are some initial questions we should ask on the matrix? Blue dots again. Maybe we have to collaborate with you again, ask a few more questions before we continue. Maybe for some reason we got to talk to NERC about an issue. But eventually a review package is sent out. That review package is the master matrix, which is the big piece, on-site schedule, tentative schedules, tentative on-site agenda, composition approval, those things like that. So that'll be a certification package that our aim is 4 to 5 months before the on-site review. Now I want to make it clear, just as a caveat, you'll see a footnote. The ROP requires a certification package to be sent no later than 90 days before the on-site. So that's what, about 3 months, but our goal is to do it sooner than that. So we have more time between that package and then your answers to the questions. Again, collaboration, touch point meetings. If there's questions during the process of answering our initial RFI, and then eventually submitting all the final documentation and evidence and narratives 2 to 3 months before the on-site is ideal. The ROP allows you, though, no later than 4 weeks before the on-site. So that we don't want that necessarily, but the ROP allows you, but 2 to 3 months before the on-site is the best thing to do. Then the documentation finally is reviewed, completed. Things are closed out where we can shortly before the on-site, at least a few weeks before. Then we have the on-site at least 1 month beforehand, maybe 2 months before you want to go live. And ideally during parallel operations, especially within EMS, we like to see an actual production type EMS, new EMS. And then eventually review is completed with a final report, a letter is sent, and then you commence operation within 12 months. And that's in the rules of procedure, because after 12 months, things could change, like standards can change. Maybe there's things we need to look at more. So this is a typical timeline if everything was great and worked well per the project's plan, but there's a lot of times when things have to be put on hold. So the certification process is a nimble process where we can pivot when we need to. I mean, we just had in 2020 several certifications started, and they were put on hold for a couple of years. Just recently completed one that was started in 2020, and that's okay. Just let us know when it's on hold. Then you got to let us know when you're resuming it, and we have to communicate that to NERC and our internally to our team. So hopefully that diagram gives you some good idea of the timeline and things to expect and when to expect them.
Hey, Sam, too, we just started our next poll, which is a word cloud. What are some of the changes you will be making within the next year or two? So if those of you can go ahead and give us your results, and then we can share them here. Sam, also just doing a quick time check. It is 3:30. Maybe we can move through these next slides a little bit quickly.
I'll do very quickly.
Okay, and you do have some questions that came in, so we want to get to those as well.
Okay. Okay, I'm just going to talk real briefly about FERC Order 881, ambient adjusted ratings, things that we know that you've worked a lot with your RTOs. MISO and PJM have done a lot of work over the past few years since this order came out. We're very confident that you're doing the right thing. We've gotten reports. I've gotten personally reports from engineering on things that MISO has collaborated with you on. You're going to do testing to make sure things are integrated correctly. So we're confident in that. I'm confident in that you'll meet and everything will go well by the deadline of July 12th, 2025. When it comes to certifications, technically, if you make a tweak to an EMS or some kind of other adjustment, technically it's a certification trigger, right? Like I mentioned before. However, we do not have to do an activity because the certification program is not designed to prepare you to comply with not only NERC standards, but a FERC order. They're meant to be when you make a change to those three triggers, and also if you're a brand new certified entity. So no actions required if you're making specific changes to your EMS related to AARs and all the work you've done with your RTOs. If you're going beyond, if you're taking advantage of that time to go beyond just those updates for AARs, we'd like to know that. If you're replacing new hardware that's come to the end of life, you're taking the opportunity to do that while you're doing some of this stuff, let us know. I'm not saying it has to go through a whole certification review. It could be a lesser activity, just asking some questions and talking with you about what those additional things you've done. Let us know, send us an application, and we'll quickly run it through with you and go from there. But knowing that you work with your entities, work with your RTOs, that I'm pretty confident myself, Sam not speaking for RF, that that kind of thing would be a lesser activity, most likely. And I think now we're almost complete. I don't know if there's any more Slido questions at this point.
Yes, thank you, Sam. Okay, let me get to our Slido questions here. So Sam, that was a great presentation. I really, I liked how you laid everything out and really explained the process and timing, how it all worked together. The first question that we got here is, as a TOP, if we have a minor upgrade to our EMS software, should we still submit a review form?
Yes. Minor upgrade can mean a lot of things, but err on the side of caution. Send us an application. It doesn't take too long to fill out if it's a minor upgrade, especially, and we'll review it. And at most, a lot of those are going to be a lesser activity where we just ask some questions. So yes, please do that, and then we'll review it case by case basis.
Okay, fantastic. And then for the sake of time, because we are running over, the last question I'll ask you is, hypothetically, if I have an upcoming audit with RF or another region, at the same time as I'm going through an EMS change, will I have both an audit and a certification, or could these activities be combined?
Yes, we've just got those questions asked last week where an entity is doing the same exact thing. They're running into an audit at the same time they're going live with a new EMS. We do our best at that point when we know that, because we have the schedules internally. We coordinate that with compliance monitoring. We don't want to have to make you go through two big types of reviews. Although audits and certifications are different, one's looking forward, one's looking back, we can always team up, and we've done that before. We'll team up with COMO, compliance monitoring, and any engagement, and do a combined certification review audit, so that you don't have to do two different efforts. And we've done that before. We don't do it that often, but it happens, and we will do the best we can to make it easy on you. But we also have to do our due diligence.
Fantastic. Okay, Sam, I lied. I'm going to ask you one more question here because I think you can answer it quickly. So for a GOP, not an RC, TOP, or BA, if we are a medium impact and move our control center location, are there any steps or processes that we need to take to notify the regional entity?
If you're a GOP,
Right.
no.
Okay.
I don't know if that affects the registration space, but it may indirectly affect whoever's, if there's a footprint change, somebody's gaining responsibilities for those. But if you're a GOP, currently the certification process does not require you to do anything.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much, Sam.